They say success is the best revenge. Cute. But sometimes success just makes you a more appealing target. My name is Miranda Stone. I'm 35 years old, and I built my interior design firm, Stone and Sterling, from sheer grit, late nights fueled by lukewarm coffee, and an unwavering belief that beauty and function could coexist harmoniously. I didn't inherit wealth. I didn't marry into it. I manifested it through thread counts, color palettes, spatial planning, and an obsessive attention to detail. My portfolio, by the time I met Gavin Rainbolt, was valued north of $4 million, a testament to climbing out of a childhood where disposable income was a foreign concept. Perhaps that's why I was so susceptible. When you fought for everything, the promise of effortless partnership, of someone simply being there, feels like an unimaginable luxury. I met Gavin, 38, at a charity gala celebrating women entrepreneurs, an event I co-chaired. He wasn't my usual type. My usual type involved blueprints and budget spreadsheets. Gavin was magnetic. He possessed a charm that felt bespoke, tailored perfectly to the listener. He didn't compliment my dress. He asked about the inspiration behind the sustainable textiles exhibit my firm had sponsored. He didn't boast about his own supposed accomplishments as a retired tech entrepreneur turned angel investor. He listened, truly listened, nodding thoughtfully as I spoke about my dream of expanding my nonprofit, which provided design workshops for underprivileged girls. He wasn't pushy. He was supportive. He'd appear at my studio during grueling 14-hour workdays, not with demands, but with artisanal coffee and a quiet smile. He learned my favorite obscure jazz singer, knew my complicated relationship with my estranged father without me having to spell it out, and volunteered his time, the most precious commodity, helping organize fundraisers for my nonprofit. He seamlessly wove himself into the fabric of my life, patching holes I hadn't even realized were there. 10 months after that gala, he proposed. On the anniversary of my mother's passing, under a canopy of fairy lights he'd strung in my meticulously designed backyard, with her favorite Ella Fitzgerald song playing softly. He didn't just present a ring. He presented a handwritten poem, referencing inside jokes and shared dreams. It was flawless. Devastatingly effective. Of course, I said yes. My best friend, Charlotte Charlie Lynn, however, was less enchanted. Charlie, 36, a force of nature packaged as a razor-sharp divorce attorney, had been my ride or die since college. She celebrated my engagement with champagne, tears, and an immediate scheduling notification for her office. "Okay, lovebird," she'd said, clinking her glass against mine, her eyes narrowed with professional assessment. "He seems great. Lovely even. But love doesn't pay the bills, and it certainly doesn't protect a multi-million-dollar portfolio you bled for." "Charlie," I sighed, "don't start." "Starting and finishing," she retorted. "We're drafting a prenup. Ironclad. Not because I don't trust him," she added, softening slightly, "but because I trust your empire. You don't build Fort Knox just to leave the door unlocked because someone has nice eyes and recites poetry." I protested, weakly. It felt cynical, antithetical to the perfect love story Gavin was writing for us. But Charlie was immovable. She drafted the document, thick and intimidating. To my surprise, when I nervously presented it to Gavin, expecting defensiveness or hurt, he simply smiled that easy, reassuring smile. "Whatever gives you peace of mind, babe," he said, kissing my forehead. "Your success is yours. I'm just happy to be along for the ride." He signed it quickly, barely skimming the pages, his signature a confident flourish on the line Charlie had pointed to. He never asked for his own lawyer to review it. Why would he? He was just happy to be along for the ride. The first 3 months of marriage were a continuation of the dream. A beautiful wedding at a historic Atlanta estate, a honeymoon in Italy that felt ripped from a movie, settling into our shared life in the Buckhead home I'd spent years designing and curating. Gavin was attentive, loving, seamlessly integrating into my world. Then the subtle shifts began. He started traveling for work more frequently. Vague business trips, hushed phone calls, meetings that ran late. He spoke of exciting investment opportunities, complex deals that required discretion. Simultaneously, small discrepancies started appearing in our joint account, the one I'd funded, the one meant for household expenses. Nothing alarming at first, just odd withdrawals, unexplained expenses. When I questioned him, he waved it off. Startup costs, entertaining potential partners, just moving things around for better returns. He made it sound complex, sophisticated, something my creative brain wouldn't grasp. Then came the bigger asks. He convinced me we needed to optimize our assets for tax purposes, presenting documents drafted by his financial advisor, someone I never met. He spoke earnestly about building a shared future, about leveraging my established success to create our legacy. Trusting him, blinded by the narrative of partnership he'd so masterfully crafted, I signed papers putting his name alongside mine on several investment accounts. Small stuff, or so I thought. Diversification, he called it. The real coup came 6 months into the marriage. He sat me down, looking earnest and concerned. He explained a convoluted strategy involving homestead exemptions and tax shelters, claiming that putting his name on the deed of my house, the sanctuary I'd poured my soul and savings into, would offer significant financial benefits and protect us. He had lawyers' letters, or so he claimed, complex charts. It seemed legitimate if baffling. He framed it as protecting me. Lost in the fog of love and Gavin's convincing jargon, I agreed. I signed the papers, granting him partial ownership. It felt like a necessary step in building our intertwined future. The avalanche followed swiftly. It turned out the investment accounts were being systematically drained, the funds rerouted through shell corporations I now know Gavin controlled. The joint savings account, my emergency cushion, evaporated overnight. Then came the letter from the bank, a $200,000 loan, taken out using my personal information and credit history, easily accessed through the documents I'd trustingly shared. Was in default. My credit score plummeted. He'd used my stellar financial reputation as collateral for his phantom deals. I discovered, through a panicked call with my actual financial advisor, who Gavin had systematically sidelined, that Gavin had attempted to leverage my home, our home, now, as collateral for yet another business venture. Thankfully, my advisor had flagged the unusual activity and stalled it, demanding direct confirmation from me, which Gavin couldn't procure while supposedly overseas. But the final, shattering blow didn't come from a bank. It came via certified mail, a cease and desist letter, not addressed to Gavin but to me, from a law firm representing a woman in California. The letter curtly informed me that I was to immediately cease all contact and communication with her husband, Mr. Gavin Rainbolt, and stop representing myself as his wife, as she was, in fact, his legal spouse. Attached was a copy of their marriage certificate, dated 5 years prior. My marriage to Gavin? The beautiful wedding, the shared home, the vows? It was all a sham, legally void. Bigamy. But the financial entanglement, the drained accounts, the fraudulent loan, the partial ownership of my home he now legally held thanks to the papers I signed? That was devastatingly real. The con wasn't just emotional, it was a meticulously planned financial siege. The world tilted. The floor dropped out. The meticulously designed walls of my life seemed to crumble inwards. I don't remember driving, but somehow I ended up at the lake house, a small, rustic cabin north of the city I'd bought years ago as a personal retreat. My sanctuary. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't look at emails. I disconnected. For a week, I existed in a haze of disbelief, shame, and a grief so profound it felt physical. How could I have been so blind? So stupid? Me, Miranda Stone, the savvy businesswoman, the woman who built an empire brick by brick, conned like a naive fool. The love story wasn't real. The partnership wasn't real. His support, his listening ear, the poem, all calculated moves in a long game designed to plunder everything I had built. Charlie found me there. She'd been calling relentlessly, finally resorting to driving up, using the spare key I'd given her years ago. She found me on the floor of the living room, curled in a ball amidst scattered papers, copies of the fraudulent loan agreement, the deed transfer documents I'd signed so trustingly, the horrifying cease and desist letter. My meticulously kept haven was a mess, mirroring the wreckage inside me. My voice, when I finally spoke, was a raw whisper, unrecognizable. He took everything, Charlie. My savings. My credit. My house is half his now, legally. He even took my name, made me his fake wife. Tears tracked silently down my face. He won. Charlie knelt beside me, her usual sharp edges softened with fierce compassion. She smoothed my hair back from my face. Then, her eyes hardened, the brilliant legal mind snapping back into focus. She picked up the deed transfer document, her expression turning glacial. "No, babe," she said, her voice low but resonant. Steel replacing the sympathy. "He didn't win. He tried to take your crown. He tried to strip you bare." She met my eyes, her gaze unwavering. "But he forgot one crucial thing." "What?" I whispered brokenly. A dangerous glint sparked in Charlie's eyes. "He forgot you have an army. And he definitely forgot about the fine print." Gavin, basking in the glow of his perceived victory, had made a fatal error. He hadn't read the prenup Charlie drafted. Not really. He'd seen the standard clauses about separate property, waived alimony, glanced at the asset schedules. He'd dismissed it as standard procedure, easily circumvented by his post-marital manipulations. He'd missed the bespoke brilliance Charlie had woven into the legal tapestry. Buried deep within Section 7, subsection D, amidst dense legalese about asset disclosure, was a clause Charlie had specifically designed, anticipating a worst-case scenario she likely never thought would actually materialize. It stated, in excruciatingly precise language, that should either party be found to have materially misrepresented their financial status, marital status, or existing liabilities prior to or during the marriage, or be found to have used undue influence, coercion, or fraudulent inducement to obtain joint ownership or control of the other party's premarital assets, then all rights to any shared or transferred assets acquired during the purported marriage would immediately and irrevocably revert to the wronged party. Furthermore, the misrepresenting party would be liable for liquidated damages equivalent to 3 times the value of the assets misappropriated or fraudulently obtained, plus all legal fees incurred by the wronged party in enforcing the agreement. It was a legal nuke disguised as a standard contract provision, and Gavin had signed it with a confident smile. While Gavin was likely celebrating, perhaps already grooming his next victim, telling tales of the rich, foolish designer he'd fleeced, my army mobilized. Charlie's pronouncement had been the spark I needed. The grief didn't vanish, but it transmuted into cold, focused rage. The designer in me, the strategist who visualized finished rooms from empty spaces, began visualizing Gavin's downfall. Operation Queen's Gambit commenced. First, freeze assets. Charlie immediately filed an emergency injunction based on the bigamy revelation and the prenup's fine print, placing a temporary freeze on the title of my house, preventing Gavin from selling or leveraging his fraudulently obtained share. His access to any remaining joint accounts, miraculously, one small investment account he'd overlooked remained, was instantly blocked. Then I engaged a specialist. I called Ethan Royce. Ethan, 42, was a phantom in the financial world. A genius investor who had backed my firm early on, he operated entirely off the grid, no social media, minimal public profile, maximum impact. He owed me a favor after I'd designed his impossible-to-please mother's penthouse. Ethan listened quietly as I laid out the situation, his only response a calm, "Consider it handled, Miranda." Within hours, his forensic accounting team was untangling Gavin's complex web of shell corporations, tracking the flow of my stolen money across borders. Ethan didn't just follow the money. He anticipated its destination. Next, we identified Gavin's primary business partner, a low-level associate named Stewart, who seemed to handle the logistics of the shell companies. Charlie approached him not with threats, but with an offer. Cooperate fully, provide testimony and evidence against Gavin, and she would ensure the DA's office viewed him as a cooperating witness, not a co-conspirator. Facing significant jail time himself, Stewart folded quickly. providing detailed records of Gavin's instructions and financial maneuvers. Armed with Stuart's testimony, evidence of bigamy, the fraudulent loan documents, and Ethan's preliminary financial tracking, Charlie presented a comprehensive case package to the district attorney's office. They launched a quiet investigation into Gavin for financial fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, and bigamy. Just as our offensive was gaining momentum, an unexpected message arrived. Not from a lawyer or an accountant, but through the contact form on my dormant design blog. The sender identified herself as Jasmine Rainbolt, Gavin's daughter, 19 years old, estranged and furious. She'd stumbled across an old post I'd written about overcoming adversity and recognized her father's name mentioned obliquely in the comments by someone speculating about my recent disappearance from public view. Jasmine's story was heartbreakingly familiar. Gavin had married her mother years ago, charmed her, convinced her to invest her life savings in one of his schemes, then vanished when Jasmine was 5, leaving them destitute. He'd paid sporadic, minimal child support, always pleading poverty, while Jasmine saw glimpses online of his apparently affluent lifestyle with other women. She had been searching for proof, for leverage, for years. She offered me everything she had. Her birth certificate listing Gavin as her father, copies of bounced child support checks, emails filled with his lies and manipulations, even the name and location of his first wife, predating the California wife, whom he'd also scammed. Jasmine didn't just provide evidence. She provided motive, pattern, and the devastating testimony of a daughter wronged. She wanted justice, not just for herself, but for all the women he'd preyed upon. The culmination wasn't a dramatic courtroom reveal, at least not initially. It played out on the sun-drenched cobblestone driveway of my Buckhead home. Gavin, utterly oblivious to the storm gathering around him, arrived on a Tuesday morning. He wasn't alone. He had a U-Haul truck rumbling behind him and a flashy blonde, barely older than Jasmine, clinging to his arm. He clearly intended to assert his fraudulently obtained ownership rights, likely planning to change the locks and physically evict me. He strode towards the front door with the proprietary air of a conqueror, keys dangling arrogantly from his fingers. He didn't make it to the porch. First, a sharply dressed process server stepped out from behind the meticulously trimmed hedges. Gavin Rainbolt. The server presented him with the first envelope. You've been served. Divorce papers. Or rather, annulment papers, citing the existing marriage in California, rendering ours legally void from inception. The blonde's smile faltered. Before Gavin could fully process that, a second server appeared, flanking him. Mr. Rainbolt. A thicker envelope this time. The court injunction, enforcing the prenup's reversion clause, immediately stripping him of any claim to the house and its contents. Attached were orders freezing every known bank account and asset linked to his name, pending the fraud investigation. And finally, the subpoena, compelling his testimony in the criminal investigation for financial fraud and bigamy. The color drained from Gavin's face, leaving behind a sickly, gray pallor. The blonde, realizing she was arm in arm not with a wealthy investor but a broke bigamist under criminal investigation, ripped her hand away as if burned. You lied to me, she shrieked, before storming back towards the street to frantically call an Uber, leaving Gavin standing alone amidst the wreckage of his latest con. Charlie, who had been watching from her car parked discreetly down the street, strolled up then, looking immaculate in a power suit. She gestured dismissively towards the U-Haul. Don't need that. She then nodded to the movers Gavin had hired, who looked utterly bewildered. Gentlemen, Mr. Rainbolt will be leaving with just his personal effects. 1 box should suffice. She directed them inside, where my housekeeper had already packed Gavin's clothes and toiletries into a single, medium-sized cardboard box. The movers handed the box to Gavin. He stood there, stunned, holding the pathetic container filled with the remnants of his life with me, the legal papers clutched in his other hand. The empire he thought he'd conquered had turned the tables with devastating, legal precision. Charlie gave him a look that could freeze lava. I suggest you find a good lawyer, Gavin. Though I doubt you can afford one now. The final, symbolic act came a month later. The engagement ring, The one bought with charm and lies, likely funded by money stolen from a previous victim, wasn't returned. Instead, I partnered with a high-profile auction house. We auctioned the ring at a glittering gala benefiting victims of domestic and financial abuse. The event was broadcast live on local television. I spoke briefly about resilience and reclaiming power. But the keynote speaker was Jasmine Rainbolt. Poised, articulate, and radiating strength, she told her story, representing the countless silent victims Gavin had left in his wake. The ring fetched an astronomical sum, every penny going to fund legal aid and scholarships for women rebuilding their lives. It wasn't just an auction. It was a public declaration that his cycle of abuse was ending, its symbols transformed into tools of empowerment. My life post-Gavin wasn't about erasing the past, but about building upon its ruins. The betrayal, the legal battle, the public reclaiming of my story, it resonated. Women reached out, sharing their own experiences of manipulation, financial abuse, and the struggle to rebuild trust. My design blog, once dormant, found a new purpose. I started writing about more than just aesthetics. I wrote about boundaries, financial literacy, legal protections, and emotional resilience. The response was overwhelming. It led to the creation of an online course, Love Proof Your Life, Legal and Emotional Armor for Modern Women. It combined practical advice on prenups, financial transparency, and asset protection with strategies for rebuilding self-worth after betrayal. Charlie contributed legal modules. Ethan offered anonymized financial case studies. The first session sold out in 48 hours. The blog became a book deal with a major publisher. Forbes magazine ran a feature profile, Miranda Stone, the designer who turned a con into a comeback kingdom. My design firm thrived, attracting clients who admired not just my work, but my resilience. And Gavin? Faced with irrefutable evidence, multiple lawsuits, criminal charges, and empty bank accounts, he did what cowards do. He skipped his court date and vanished. Became a fugitive. For 6 months, there was silence. I focused on my work, my writing, my nonprofit. I rebuilt my financial security, stronger and wiser than before. I found peace not in forgetting, but in transforming the pain into purpose. Then, one quiet evening as I was sketching designs for a new client's dream home, a safe, beautiful space I felt privileged to create, my phone pinged. A text message from Ethan Royce. Just 2 words. Got him. Attached was a brief, encrypted report. Gavin had surfaced in Cancun, Mexico. Using a fake passport and a new alias, he was already working his tired old charm on the daughter of a wealthy hotelier, pitching another phantom investment scheme. But Ethan's network was global. Working discreetly with international authorities, they had flagged his fake identity. Interpol picked him up at a seaside restaurant mid-pitch. Extradition proceedings were underway. He wouldn't escape justice this time. I read the message, a slow smile spreading across my face. No triumphant fist pump, no surge of vengeful glee. Just a quiet, profound sense of closure. The final loose and tied up. I took a sip of wine, the skyline glittering outside my window, the view from my penthouse, bought with my money, secured by my strength. I looked down at the blueprints spread across my desk, ready to build something beautiful again. My name was on the deed, on the business, on the brand. Crowned, not crushed. And finally, completely, gloriously free.